PM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. And wow, I mean, like this is been crazy weather across the United States. You know, Texas is without power right now, or parts of Texas, I guess. And we have another storm coming in behind us. And I was just talking before we went live here that last night here in Orange County, California, at least by my house, we had a huge windstorm come in, knocking things all over the place. And so that being said, you know, when disaster strikes, staying connected matters more than ever. And so especially for first responders, medical support, recovery efforts, and things like this. And so what is your backup plan when terrestrial communications fails due to storms and whatever else that's going on there? So today we're going to be talking about satellites. And I think that's kind of exciting. Now, first, let's bring Dan into the room. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning. Talk about communication failures and things like that. You know, this is a good example of it. So the cool part about it is that we are here, you know, bringing in some of our guests here. And I want to bring Tony in. Tony, come in. Good morning, Tony.
Hello, good morning.
So satellites, you know, it's one of those things that we think about that you watch TV movies and stuff like this, and there's a guy in the basement and he whips out a satellite phone and starts using it. So we're not quite there yet as far as the ability to connect the satellites and stuff like this. But the idea of satellite communication, satellite connectivity, especially satellite internet, I think is huge. And as a guy coming in from, I was in the Navy, and we connected all over the place to satellites throughout the globe. So this is not necessarily new technology, right? But it's becoming more affordable for smaller organizations and individuals to purchase. So what's been the catalyst in the change of the huge expense satellites compared to what we can use?
Well, the change was ushered in the mid '80s by Hughes, a small garage kind of outfit in Montgomery County, Maryland, and grew to the company it is today with over 1 million subscribers in the U.S. and the company ushered in the era of VSAT, very small aperture terminals is what VSAT stands for. These offer affordable broadband service plans by satellite transmission. And initially really established to serve the unserved as the internet was proliferating and so forth. And terrestrial lines weren't everywhere they are today, and they still aren't everywhere they need to be. We have been able to serve consumer customers, government customers, commercial customers with a sort of path diverse kind of medium, and that's satellite transmission. And so the big antennas that you used to see outside of antenna farms or outside of movie theaters and so forth have been replaced by antennas that are about a meter wide and able to deliver increasingly high speeds at increasingly lower prices.
Absolutely. I mean, I have or had DirecTV, or have, I guess, still there. And we utilize DirecTV, which I guess at one point was a Hughes product, right?
No. Well, at one point we were affiliated with DirecTV. That's absolutely right. We're now part of EchoStar Corporation, which has an affiliate and sort of affiliation and common ownership with Dish Networks.
Okay.
So with when I worked in Waco, Texas, me and my boss had a satellite phone for emergencies. I was the emergency management coordinator or assistant emergency management coordinator. And it's not like unheard of that you have a satellite phone, but how available and realistic is it that the everyday person could potentially have a satellite phone?
Well, that day may be coming. It is not a typical consumer product. It's usually used by emergency managers, by folks at FEMA and various government agencies around. It's certainly not something you can use indoors because you have to have that visibility and accessibility to the southern sky to reach the bird. So it's really more of an issue of use for outside communications where emergency managers have rushed to a scene of need and so forth, like down buildings or emergency shelters, so forth.
With everything, especially right now with the weather going, and we got the power outages, and Texas is bad. It makes me kind of happy that I left Texas because everything going on there. But realistically, when power shuts down and cell towers go down and all this stuff, so there's a greater need. So what kind of technology do you guys have available that would aid in establishing these uplinks?
Well, we use these smaller antennas of which I spoke, which typically in most use cases for most of our customers, by and large, are fixed mounts attached to the buildings, attached to roofs, or mounted on the ground and wired into the building and so forth. Or in the case of emergency managers' use, we set up transportable units that are capable of being moved and then moved to a scene of need, whereby then the emergency managers or the technicians can set it up quickly and establish communications. A lot of times this is done during an event like a Superstorm Sandy or Hurricane Maria back in Puerto Rico. Established sites that we have done along the Gulf Coast over the years. And these basically work because they're independent of ground infrastructure. And ground infrastructure, a lot of people really don't think about it terribly much, but you're holding a cell phone and that connects to a cell tower, which is connected to other cell towers and to the network terrestrially. So if the towers go down, if the terrestrial communications that support the wireless communications go down, that's a great time to have a satellite backup communications path. And really what we stress is really not so much a condemning of the terrestrial infrastructure that is just magnificent in this country. It's the path diversity part that really makes a difference here. It's that alternate way that you can communicate to the world when your traditional means, your normal means are disrupted.
So when we think about satellite phones, satellite communication, right? And again, you go back to the movies, right? Because everybody looks at Hollywood when it comes to making their decisions on how things work, right? So you get a guy or a gal running around, a spy movie or whatever, and they fill out the sat phone and are able to dial any kind of telephone number that they want to dial into and talk to whoever. Now it kind of can work that way, but in it's the idea of grid down, who do you speak to? I mean, do you have to have another person with another satellite phone? I mean, how do you see that being a robust communication tool during disaster?
Well, certainly the connections that we provide are basically broadband internet service via a satellite transport. So we're usually connecting to, in the efforts that we participate in, we're not really in the satellite phone business, but we're more in the broadband internet business. And so we're connecting to networks. We're connecting to the internet. Typically what we're doing in our work with a state emergency management agency, such as Texas and Pennsylvania, we have a really dedicated network that they communicate among emergency managers in the state. What we do for FEMA is we go to a scene of need when called upon by FEMA, and we will establish internet connections at those sites. We bring the transportable, we set it up, we aim it to the satellite and the across the equator, and we establish connection to the greater internet, and then they're using that for phone calls to allow residents and consumers to call loved ones in a distant part of the country or distant part of the world and say they're okay. It allows FEMA to sort of coordinate logistics and management. And so it really is that kind of capability and sort of a network intervention or a network temporary replacement that allows access through the internet. So whoever that person is or that entity on the other side that you're communicating with, they're getting that access to the internet as well.
So when you go into a jurisdiction that is in need, you're establishing a network of internet access so that the first responders and all that can be established, right? But you're also setting up so that potentially other communications can take place within that network, correct?
That's exactly right. And typically at a FEMA shelter or disaster recovery center, they set up a local area network that connects to a portal, a server, if you will, that will then connect to our satellite antenna, and then we beam across. So multiple users can be accessing it just as if you were at an office in a regular site and you had an antenna on the roof. Multiple people connecting through the LAN to the antenna.
Are these trailers? Are they generator powered? Are they solar powered? How does the technology work that puts out the technology for others?
A number of ways that the customers usually, the emergency management team usually provides their own generators. Yes, we do need power for our gear to work, and so we're usually connecting to that. And we can provide solar antenna, solar means they've got these things that look like a blanket, if you will, and they connect to the sun and they establish power that way, and they're very portable and very transportable. When you ask about whether they are trailers or not, yes, sometimes the antenna can be on top of a trailer, can be on the back of a pickup truck. It can be as part of a very sophisticated RV unit that travels around wherever it needs to, depending on the organization using it. So there's a number of ways. The really crux of it is that it's mobile. It can be it's comms on the halt for the most part. There's comms on the move. There are, for the military, a lot of capabilities that they use and put a dome on top of a Hummer and on top of a command vehicle and so forth. And that can give you communications while you're moving toward to the scene. That's now done in the airborne world as well. So it can these algorithms that we've developed can cut through the helicopter blades, flying to a scene of need and keeping the people on board the helicopter in communications with whomever they need to be with. So there are a lot of the comms on the halt is typically what FEMA uses and uses with us and some of the other emergency management agencies. And you get to a scene, you stop, you set up the antenna, you point it to the satellite, and then you're good to go. And usually that's done at a camp, a base site, a disaster scene, if you will. Oftentimes the use cases are near the scene of need or near the disaster where a stand-up office has been set up, a stand-up site to coordinate logistics.
So when you set your trailer up, you set the satellite up there. Now you have internet communications going into the space back down, and then do you set like a Wi-Fi area up for all the other computers to work off that one net? And then this is the big question here: how many satellites do you need? How many dishes do you need to have? And how quick does that get overwhelmed with users?
Well, typically, what happened, for instance, in Puerto Rico, was that FEMA set up a number of sites across the island, and we had an antenna that was set up at each site. So however many, 15, 10, 20 people that were gathered there, they were doing work. So they were coordinating for logistics. They were filing claims for citizens that came in and filed claims. And there were frequently, for instance, in Superstorm Sandy, we saw people there that were from the SBA. So they were setting up SBA claims for their damaged stores, their damaged business sites, and so forth. So you've got Department of Interior, Parks folks, a number of people that'll be there from several agencies at a FEMA disaster recovery site. So there could be any number of people, yes, connected to a Wi-Fi or some kind of LAN that use all those facilities and connect to the satellite and then beam up to the satellite to connect to the internet.
So how many people can it hold?
It kind of depends on the traffic. It's really a question of speed. One of the things that, or among the things that people used to say about satellite was old, slow, and expensive. Well, now it's new, it's fast, and it's a whole lot cheaper. So you've gone from speeds of when I joined Hughes of 750 kilobits per second to 3 meg up and 25 meg down in today's high throughput satellite capabilities. We've got another satellite coming out, being launched in the first quarter of 22 that will have download speeds of 100 megabits, unheard of previously in the satellite world. So it's not necessarily a question of how many people are on site. It's a question of the use cases, the files you're transmitting, and now you're working with much faster speeds than you used to just a few years ago.
Absolutely. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about like media communications and how that works with satellite.
Okay.
The Outer Limits Supply Company was founded on the idea of providing high-quality first aid kits. Their goal is to supply the life-saving equipment you'll need to mitigate the majority of injuries often seen during austere times. From minor injury on an outdoor adventure with your family to your team responding to a major traumatic event, Outer Limits Supply has the kits to manage most situations, providing practical, user-friendly first aid kits that anyone can use. Enter Ian Weekly, all capitals, at checkout and save 20% off your total purchase. Go to www.outerlimitsupply.com today. That's outerlimitsupply.com. So before we went to break, I kind of mentioned the idea of the media communications, and what I was referring to there is like, how do we get basic like packets up into the air of information and then back down? I mean, I just kind of trying to get into the nuts and bolts of exactly how that works, because I'm not quite a Luddite, but I'm pretty darn close to it. I'm a point and click guy, and ask producer Brian over here. When it comes to computer stuff, if it's not there basic for me, Android or Apple type stuff, I'm a little bit lost. But how does it exactly work? Like, do I just plug my computer in and we're good to go? Can I do video through this internet like we're doing today here with these information with this? Because a lot of the stuff that we're doing today, as far as emergency management, has a really huge technology component to it. Whether we're using the virtual EOC type software, video communications back and forth, how does that work in general, or do we lose capabilities when we move to satellite?
So it's a great question, Todd. And let's take the example of, first of all, it would sort of illustrate the difference between the terms of emergency preparation versus emergency management or emergency response. So let's just take, for instance, you and your studio. You're connecting to the internet so that we can have this podcast and this video. And so you've got a communications line outside of from your studio that connects to the local telecom network that connects to the internet. And let's say, for instance, Joe Backhaul is with his hoe in the next lot next door to you, and he's getting ready to build the next parking lot next door, and he cuts your fiber, he cuts your copper. And if you had a router at your facility that connected to a satellite on the roof, it would recognize the failed condition of your primary path, and it would switch the communication to the router, to the satellite antenna. That will connect to the internet just like your terrestrial line would connect to the internet. And we could do this video. We could have a voice conversation. You could send a file to your producer. You could send an email to Dan, one to Kate, who's also on the line here. And so it doesn't change much. Now, that fiber might have a whole lot more capacity and speed than the satellite connection, but it's a connection nonetheless. Mm-hmm. And it has, you pay a different price to, your phone company for your terrestrial line, and you do whatever you need to do through it. You pay a different price for the service plan that you get from your satellite provider, which should be Hughes, by the way. And so, and we'll give you a service plan of a certain amount of speed. And the speed is 3 megabits up and 25 megabits down. So why is that asymmetrical? Because the nature of data transmission is symmetrical. You type in, Dan, let's talk, or you type in a question to Dan, and he writes back to you, and that's a very short inquiry. He writes back to you a very large dissertation on what it is you wanted to know. So 3 meg up is fine. The 25 meg down load speed is what you need to accommodate his response. It's the same thing for a simple inquiry. If you're at the Social Security Administration and you type in Dan's, name, and then what will come back is his file. Okay. So it's just a different medium. And I go back to the path diverse issue and the emergency prep issue. You had that backup line through satellite, but maybe you don't. Maybe all you have is the terrestrial line. And if the guy next door with his backhoe is cutting the line, this conversation will go dark.
Right.
So that's what we're really talking about, and that's where FEMA comes in with either having us on site already, or for instance, what happened in the first Puerto Rico hurricane was that they asked us to get there very quickly with gear, and it took us 2 weeks to do it because of all the transportation issues, getting gear and people and stuff to the island. And then secondly, so many bridges were destroyed. So it's not like there were a row of Jeeps waiting for installers to put the antenna in the back of the Jeep and go driving away because the roads weren't in great condition. So all this got really bogged down. Then after everything finally did install and service was temporarily restored for FEMA and for businesses and for consumers to use the network again, any network, right? FEMA kept, after everything was shut down, and really we were there for about a year. Usually in emergencies, you're there for about 2 or 3 days, right, and then everything's restored. In Puerto Rico, we were there for over a year. In New York, New Jersey, during Superstorm Sandy, we were there for about 6 months. So, but here's what FEMA did. They didn't say, Hughes, okay, take the stuff back. They said, no, we're going to keep a number of these units. In fact, all of the units, we're going to keep them in a warehouse here in Puerto Rico. So we don't want to ever go through that logistical nightmare again. And when they had the second disaster, or a second hurricane, They had units there, and they were up in no time at all and were of service. And that's emergency prep. It's emergency prep to have the antenna on the roof, right? And you can't have them on every roof. I mean, we get the practicality of how expensive that could be, but critical sites, and that's the advocacy I've been clamoring for years. The years I've been at Hughes, is that the government agencies, and my market is the government market, federal, state, and local. And so I advocate that critical federal locations, critical government locations, federal and state and local, should have some kind of path diverse, resilient plan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, sorry, Dan, let me do this really quick, and because I think this is pertinent, it just came up. So one of the listeners, Christopher, he asked, do you need to have a dedicated team to manage it? And can it be integrated into Teams' existing logistical tech or team to manage?
Well, the answer, Christopher, is a little bit of both. It's FEMA, we've trained a number of their techs. For instance, second Puerto Rico hurricane, all we had to do was be present and available back at Hughes headquarters in Germantown, Maryland, and work with the FEMA techs remotely, because we had already trained them how to set up the transportables. So it was a question of activating the service with the Hughes folks back home, and the FEMA guys knew what to do. So it's a question of how often you use the stuff. In their case, they had used it only recently, so they were all fresh in their training and how to set things up. If an agency were to have transportables in their warehouses, they don't use them all that often. Sometimes it pays to get a periodic refresher course. And but in terms of establishing the connections, it's sort of the logistics of moving the hardware around and getting that in the places where you need it. For instance, in Superstorm Sandy, they were setting up in vacant churches, school gymnasiums. It's not the typical place where you need path diversity. What you need is an agile team, and within 48 hours, we're getting things up and established and running in our arrangement with FEMA. So
go ahead.
Oh, they've taken that effort to sort of establish a contractual arrangement with us that requires us to be there in 48 hours. Now that sort of blew up during the first Puerto Rico hurricane because the logistics were so challenging. But by and large, they're not setting things up everywhere. They're depending on us to get stuff there, the necessary gear needed as quickly as possible.
You answered my question in your response. So ultimately, it was how long between you get the call to when you get to the location, and the pre-staging is awesome. Knowing that something happened there, we're going to leave equipment there for the next time, which that's a great thing. But ultimately, you get the 48 hours. Once you get there, how long is it between you getting there and them being able to get going and start up and running with the system that you put in place?
And at times I went up to a couple of the sites in the New York area during Sandy, and they weren't all transportables. Sometimes it was a typical roof mount or a parking lot mount, and it was anchored by ballast, and the installers usually have that kind of equipment and materials. And they can set it up pretty darn quickly. I mean, it's doesn't take long. Transportable, like sometimes it's 2 or 3, tripod kind of pulls and so forth, and the antenna flips up. You can get them manual, you can get them push button, satellite for dummies, if you will. And next thing you know, it points up and it's magic, and it's pointing up to the satellite. Then you connect the wires to the local Wi-Fi, and you're up and running. Typically, you can set up a transportable in about 10 minutes, and then engage with Hughes by phone to get the service activated. So it really doesn't take long. You can be the 48 hours get you there. Make sure that we get our installers lined up to go to the sites that FEMA directs us to go to, and it's pretty darn efficient. We have these million subscribers, a million plus subscribers, and we do just a number of commercial sites and government sites, and our installers are nationwide, and they know how to get things done pretty quickly.
And so one last question, and I'll turn it over to Todd so we can end the show. But I want to say, my question is that book for Satellites for Dummies. Can you send a copy of that to Todd, please? I think Todd, he's already raising his hand. He knows what he knows. We all know Todd.
Well, based on the setup we had before the podcast started, it sounded like you two needed a couple of antennas at each of your sites. So,
but you're not wrong.
Yeah, but we try to take as much of the burden of getting it's what we do, right? And the folks that we're supporting, I mean, those emergency managers have a lot of responsibilities. They got to get blankets, they got to get phones. Well, a lot of times we've provided the phones too, but they've got to get access to a lot of material that help them do what they do. And we try to take the burden of setting up the communications, the emergency rapid communications, if you will. We try to take that burden off of them.
So tell the listeners, tell all those who are listening, watching right now, how do they find you? How do they get more information? How do they contact you for inquiries or just general information?
Well, the easiest way would be the web. For those in the government world, it would be government.hughes.com, and that'll get access to my team and Hughes.com, and then there's various ways through Hughes.com that you can get to the enterprise side or the consumer side of things. So we're set up and ready to take calls. We are not happy that disasters occur, but we want to help and lend some ability to recover. It's if you haven't done the prep, we'll help you recover as quickly as we can and get into instead of emergency planning, into emergency management, and then an emergency recovery. So those are the kind of areas where we can help.
So Tony, we're here on LinkedIn and Facebook right now and YouTube. Are there any social media channels where people could follow you guys?
Sure. We're on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. Hughes is on LinkedIn and so forth. And we try to make it easy to find us.
Absolutely. And those links are going to be down in the show notes as well. So if you're driving down the road or your pencil's not sharp, no fret. Just go to the show notes and click those links down there and you can connect with Tony and his team. That's awesome. So Tony, thank you so much for your time today. I know we're coming here to the hard stop that we have. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to everybody out there listening before we let you go?
One of the things I'd like to see if it were Christmas would be that more funds would be allocated for resiliency in communications resiliency. And that I think is the dilemma that emergency managers face, is that typically those funds haven't been allocated. They've been allocated to delivering the primary means of communications, and not much has been paid attention to in terms of path diversity, which I think is very critical. It speeds up your recovery.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, thank you for your time today. Dan?
I was just saying that's a mitigative effort. So that's one of those things that you can use mitigation funds for. So that's an area to push for.
Yep.
Absolutely. That is so true. So, you know what? I mean, that being said, we're to the end. I can sit here and listen to Tony talk about satellite stuff all day long because I just find it fascinating. It's like, it isn't like it is on the TV, where you can be down in the basement and grab your sat phone and start using it. There are some antennas and things like this that have to be connected to it. But man, when you need communication and you're in the middle of nowhere, satellite, I guess anywhere for that matter, but if you're in a place where it's grid down, satellite phones and satellite communication, satellite internet is really critical. And you're starting to see more and more commercial use of this, not just the government use. And Tony, thank you so much for your time.
Very welcome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great one.
So, hey, Dan, I know you and we've been working pretty hard on this thing called the Crisis Cafe, and we are creating a community, social media, I guess, for lack of a better term, but community for emergency managers where we can go have conversations, not have to worry about all this other stuff that's around us regarding things that don't really matter to emergency management. And you can go to crisis-cafe.com. That's www.crisis-cafe.com and join us. Dan, what do you got to say about that?
No, I think, ultimately, thank you for plugging that. It's the Crisis Cafe is a place where we can all come together, but it's also a place where we can pull all the resources that are available to emergency managers and leaders in the emergency management profession to one place. And we can also gather the information that emergency managers are seeking and asking questions that they're asking, and we can bring that information to them. To a place where they can find the answers they're looking for, but also network with other emergency management professionals across the country, the world. Really, we have people from all other countries that are signed up already, and so it's going to be it's a great start to what's going to be a great community that's going to ultimately bring the emergency management profession a step further and into a new direction as which we want to go as far as coming out of our infancy to our toddler phase and being able to start walking a little bit further down the road in emergency management. Also, be free to follow us on LinkedIn, find us on Facebook, find Todd and myself on LinkedIn as well. And thank you very much.